Alrighty, recording has begun.
Thank you for joining us for this 2021 Student Symposium panel discussion on the importance of licensure and preparing for the FE and PE exams. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few technical instructions with you. If you are having any technical problems, please visit Zoom support at support.zoom.us, or you can type your questions in the chat box and our administrator will assist you. All participants are currently muted for this panel. However, if you have questions, please type them into the chat box in your control panel, or you can use the raised hand feature in Zoom. We will address your questions throughout this seminar as our time permits, and we invite you to unmute yourself after we see that you've got your hand raised. We look forward to an engaging and interactive panel today, but first we have a quick message from our 2021 Student Symposium advocate, Raul Oliveira.
Hey, Lindsay, I can't hear it.
Oh, Sean, you may have to share with sound. Thank you, Kacey. A little technical hiccup, but we will get that fixed for everybody.
Okay.
Founded in 1968, Raul Oliveira Inc. is a premier engineering consulting and program management firm. Our purpose is to provide professional consulting services with passion and integrity to help build a better world for our employees, their families, our clients, and the communities we serve. Raul Oliveira has grown over our 50-year history, expanding from our headquarters in San Antonio, Texas, to an engineering news record top 200 firm of more than 550 employees operating coast to coast from California to New York and all across Texas. Today, we are a company of engineers, geologists, scientists, and technologists providing project management and oversight services, forensics engineering, construction materials engineering, testing and observation, geotechnical engineering, testing and pavement consulting, building sciences consulting, and infrastructure oversight and quality management.
Sean, thank you for playing our wonderful sponsor video. Now, thanks again for joining us today for the panel discussion on the importance of licensure and preparing for the PE and FE exams. I am pleased to introduce our three panelists today, Raul Oliveira, Kacey Paul, and Sam Levitino. These three engineers bring a wide range of experiences and are in different stages within their respective careers. Since joining WJE in 2019, Raul Oliveira has been involved in a variety of assessments of new and existing bridges, buildings, and other infrastructure. His project work experience includes the evaluation, design, and rehabilitation of a variety of materials, including concrete, steel, wood, and masonry. Prior to joining WJE, Raul was a graduate research assistant at the University of Texas at Austin, where he evaluated the shrinkage behavior of geopolymers and Portland cement slurries for oil well cement applications. He enjoys running and salsa dancing in his spare time and is looking forward to the opportunity to gather in person again soon. Kacey Paul has a decade of experience in the fields of civil and environmental engineering, where she has contributed to the projects throughout the states of Texas, Arizona, and California. She is a licensed professional engineer and a certified floodplain manager. Kacey's specialty is water resources, and she is currently the city engineer for Marble Falls. She has served in numerous leadership roles throughout the engineering community, including president of the ASCE Austin branch. Kacey also has extensive experience in international fieldwork from her time in the Peace Corps and with Engineers Without Borders. In her spare time, she enjoys spending time with her 2 adorable daughters and playing rugby. Sam Levitino is a stormwater design engineer at Freese and Nichols' Austin office. He has worked in the industry for nearly 2 years, specializing in the design of stormwater infrastructure, as well as small and large-scale hydrologic and hydraulic analysis. Sam attended Texas Tech University and graduated in the spring of 2019. He currently volunteers for the ASCE Austin Branch Younger Member Forum's Golf Tournament Committee and looks forward to playing a tournament soon. Okay, let me go through a couple of slides for you all before we get officially started. Again, we want to thank all of our sponsors for the 2021 Student Symposium. We could not have this event without their generosity. We also hope they met wonderful students during yesterday's career fair. All right, to start things off this afternoon, I have a few prepared questions for the panelists. As we discuss these initial questions, I hope that each of you in the Zoom room today will add to the conversation by sharing your questions within the chat box or by raising your hand in Zoom. So to get us started, my first question is for Kacey. Kacey, can you give us an example of a time you utilized your professional engineering license?
Sure. I actually used my license this week. We are responding to some incidences associated with the Arctic storm that happened last month or in February. And so I was applying for permits through TCEQ.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you, Kacey.
Yeah.
All right, my next question is for Sam. Sam, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience taking the Fundamentals of Engineering or FE exam? For example, how long did you study? And you want to mention that Texas Tech course that you took?
Yeah, absolutely. So I took the FE, it's been about 1.5 years since I've taken it, but I took it 6 months after graduating. And I think that was a good and bad experience, but my preparation through that course you mentioned was really good and substantial because we were actually able to cover each individual topic each week. And if you are not familiar with the FE, it's an exam that you're required to take before you become licensed and before you can take your PE. So it's really necessary to take that and as well as to receive your EIT accreditation. But the Texas Tech course was really good, and I was able to go through and really brush up on a lot of subjects, and that really helped me prepare. And I'm sure y'all will have a lot of questions on maybe what that course entailed and what details it went into, but really having a good broad overview of every single subject and a refresher is probably the main important thing there with that course. And luckily they did offer that, so it was required for me. But if that's not required for you, I really encourage everyone to do something similar to that in their preparation, and that you should really brush up on every subject.
Thank you, Sam. No, I think that's a great point. Got to take a course to get prepared. And in a similar question I have for Raul, Raul, I wanted to ask you, how long did you study in order to prepare for the Practice and Principles of Engineering or the PE exam? And did you take a study preparation course?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Lindsay. As far as my studying goes, I did take a course. I took a course provided by Test Masters where they sort of provided like coursework material and which included like lots of like notes and handouts for me to study off of, which is ultimately what I use primarily in the exam. And they provided like videos that accompany the coursework, which was a good good way to remember all the stuff I did in college. Again, this test I didn't take, I guess, until 2 years after I graduated from my master's degree, which is now, I guess, 4 years after my original bachelor's degree. And again, with the course that I was taking, I studied maybe about a month and a half prior to the exam. And it was just a month and a half, but it was a month and a half of pretty intensive work. And this is, again, like after I graduated, I'm working full time. So it was quite a stressful time, I would say, for a month and a half, because you're putting in your 8, 9, maybe 10 hours of work sometimes, coming home and doing another additional hour or 2 or 3, depending on what's going on that day. But yeah, like I said, I did take this course provided by Test Masters, which is one of the good, I guess, test prep courses that are out there. I know ASCE provides one as well that's actually provided at a cheaper rate than the Test Masters, and has pretty much every single thing that I had in Test Masters, plus a little more extra things, which I would also recommend. Like I said, I didn't take that one myself, but it has everything that I did have in my Test Masters course. And from the experiences that I've from talking to other people that did take the ASCE course, they felt very prepared for the exam. And again, they use pretty much all the ASCE materials for the exam, and they were really prepared for the exam.
Thanks, Raul. Yeah, that's a great course to mention for studying for the PE exam. When you have a chance, would you mind putting a link in our chat box to that PE exam course that the ASCE Austin Branch Younger Member Forum offers?
I'll pull up here a bit.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I've got a couple of questions in the chat box, and I do see our panelist, Sam, has his hand up. So Sam, let me go to you first.
Yeah, I was just trying to address those questions, and then we can go over to whatever the next subject is. The first one is, how does the FE, well, the first one I'm seeing right now on my screen is, how does the FE compare to the NCEES practice exams? So they're very similar. It's my understanding that all the NCEES practice exams are old FE questions, and you should note that each year these questions will cycle out. There's never going to be the same exam twice. No one individual will take the same exam. It's online, so it's automatically updated and different for each individual. But that is a really good starting place. And I actually took 2 of those practice NCEES exams, and I really think they adequately prepared me. I don't know if you want to dive into the other questions, but
yeah, let's do that. I've got a couple other questions. Wow, this audience has a lot of questions, so we might have to talk kind of fast, you guys. Okay, let me go back to the first question that came in from Benjamin. He asked if there was any other in-person or online courses that we haven't already mentioned that you would recommend preparing for the FE exam. In addition to preparing for the FE exam courses, is there any additional recommended reference material? So in preparing for the FE exam, Sam, you mentioned there was a course at Texas Tech. Is anybody on our panel aware of any other FE study courses?
I'm not familiar.
Okay, what about reference material? I'm sorry, go ahead, Raul.
Oh, I was just going to add into that one. As far as like, I guess, test prep courses for the FE specifically, I don't know of anything specifically. I'm pretty sure the test prep courses that are provided for the PE, they all pretty much have an FE version of it, which is basically the PE stuff, but just like a smaller portion of it, I think. And so like, you might want to take a look at like Test Masters. I don't think the ASCE has one, but they're good. They have a good one for PE, but Test Masters has one for FE, I'm pretty sure. And so does PPI. And I think there was one more, but yeah, for sure. Test Masters I know has the FE version of it.
Okay, no, that's great.
Oh, I don't want to date myself, but I think I was probably one of the last years that they had the paper exams for the FE. And can y'all refresh my memory? When I took it, you were not allowed to bring in any outside materials, and they gave you kind of a formula book. Is that still the case? So one of the tips that I got was to buy the formula book ahead of time so that you could get familiar with using it as you're taking the other practice exams. And it might be slightly different when you go to take your test, but it'll be pretty comparable to the one that you get. And so I did that, and it was really helpful for me.
That's a great tip, Kacey. I appreciate that. Definitely looking at that formula book before the exam can be very helpful. And that is a good segue to our next question. We are looking for any test taking tips on these specific exams. So I'll pose this question to all three of our panelists and let them share their top test taking tips, since they've all been through at least one of these exams. Raul, would you like to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. For the FE exam, so that's the first one prior to the PE one. For the FE, sort of how like Kacey was saying, get a hold of the reference manual, which is for the FE. That's literally all you're getting. That's all you're getting from the exam people, and you're not allowed to bring anything else to the exam. So really, all you're getting is this sort of PDF version that's provided to you on your computer when you're taking the exam. And what I would do, or what I did, was just get accustomed to the different sections. And then during the exam, they have a Control F function. So literally, if you don't know what you're working on and where to find it, just put Control F and type in like the keyword, and you should be fine. So that's a big benefit of having the online version for the FE exam. For the PE exam, which I just took here in October 2020, so I just came off of it. That one's still in person on paper, and for that one you have to pretty much bring all your own resources. So for me, that was pretty much the test master's test prep course material that I got, and the specific codes that I would need for my structural engineering exam portion of the test. And in terms of test prep tips, I would say for the PE is for sure tab everything, because while you're in the middle of the exam, like you remember that you did a question, but like you don't know where it is. So I would tab, all the different specific questions that you did, where, tab like the different chapters that are in each course material, and just make it easier on you to find things quick. At least me personally, I'm not a tab person kind of person. Like if my everyday stuff, like I usually like to find it on my own, or just like, go to the table of contents, and I'm able to, go down the line and figure out where I'm going. In my, I guess, day-to-day practice of like working, like that's pretty much what I do. But for the exam, having everything tabbed and readily available and knowing where things are was a big help. And then now, because I have that tab, those tabs on my codes and my manuals, now when I am working and doing that, I guess day-to-day, well, now I'm not struggling going down line by line. And at the same time, like the exam or preparing for the exam does a really good job of preparing you, or just preparing you, and I guess knowing and getting familiar with the code. So then now, like, I feel like I have a strong understanding of where to find things and how to do things in my everyday work. And so even though I wasn't doing that specifically for work prior, like now that I'm getting new work assigned to me, it was a good sort of preparation, even just to do my day-to-day work stuff now.
Well, thank you so much. I agree. Being organized is really a key to these tests. Kacey, do you have any additional test-taking tips you want to add?
Sure. For both of them, get familiar with the calculator that you're going to use in the test. I know when I took the FE, I was using a graphing calculator, and so I had to switch to my other calculator. So definitely get familiar with that. The two things I want to say about the PE, take as the thing that I benefited from the most was working through sample problems and writing down all of my notes. And then if you just punch holes and put those in a ring binder, you can take that into the test. And a lot of the questions are similar. So you can have that as a reference material in there. Also, in terms of your reference material, a good piece of advice that I got was to get two really good reference manuals that you go to for 75% of the problems, because it's also about time management. So if you're flipping through 4 different references, you're not going to have time to answer the question properly. So 1 or 2 really good, broad manuals that you're comfortable working in.
Thank you. Sam, do you have any additional test taking tips you would like to share with our attendees?
I do, yeah, and those are all really good pieces of advice. I'm not sure if y'all can see the link I provided, but what that is in the chat, if you would look at it, this is an example of the FE Civil, and that's what I took. And it goes through the 14 different subjects that you will see. And it also has a range of the amount of questions you might have. And so what I did, and what I think actually was really, really helpful, and I would recommend it to y'all, is I did just a high level overview for about a week before I took the exam. And I went and I ranked each subject based on what I thought my strengths were and what I thought my weaknesses were. And based on those ranks, I knew, okay, if I were to receive this many questions on this given subject, I know I will understand these well. Whereas, for instance, maybe dynamics, which is a subject I really struggled in because it had been 2 years since I've taken that course. And not to mention, it's pretty challenging for most folks. I knew that if I prioritized all my strengths and I pushed aside dynamics towards, I knew that I could answer everything else correctly and spend my time on dynamics at the end, I was able to answer enough questions correct towards I knew I would pass. And that's a very good similar example to what Kacey said in the time management, is I also use that ranking system to know, okay, I'm really strong in math, but I'm not strong in dynamics. I'm going to spend the majority of my time on the questions I'm strong at. And unless you're a really fast test taker, I would encourage you to do something similar to this, because the beauty of having so many questions and so many different subjects is you will find your own strengths and you need to capitalize on those.
That's a really great tip. Thank you, Sam. I agree. These exams really focus on your time management skills. I recall taking the PE exam and keeping an eye on my watch. I knew I had X amount of minutes for each problem, and I would just move ahead if I had to. I've got a couple more really great questions. So pivoting just a little bit and focusing on the PE exam, what type of references would you recommend bringing to the PE exam? So Raul, I'll ask you that since you're our most recent PE exam taker.
Right. So for my exam, I was taking the structural engineering exam, or just structural engineering version of the exam. Each different discipline has its own. But for mine, and I don't know how much you guys know about it, but the test is broken up into a morning and an afternoon section. It's for a total of 8 hours. For the morning, it's your general, what they call breadth section, where it covers your hydraulics, your geotech, your structural, your transportation, a little bit of everything. Whereas the afternoon is your discipline specific, which mine was being the structural engineering one. And so for the morning, all I brought for like that section was my test prep material provided by the test master's test prep course that I took, along with my sort of general, like very general reference material in it's called like the abbreviation's like CERN. It's like Civil Engineering Reference Material or Reference Manual. I think it's the most popular one. If you ask anyone, they always sort of reference that one. It's by I forgot what his first name is, but the last name of the author is Lindenberg. And so if you get that reference manual, I think you're in pretty good shape alone. And that's again that's what most people use. For the afternoon, I brought, and I think Lindsay's showing it right now. For the afternoon, I brought basically all the references required by the exam. And so whenever you're signing up, the course or the exam entity, so NESIS, will provide the list of references that might be used and that might be used on the exam or that they might test you on. And so for me, that included my ACI 318, my ASHTO manual, wood design guides, OSHA standards, and again, all those references that are required are listed, and those are all the ones that I brought.
That's a great list of references. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so while we're still focusing on test taking, we've got a great question coming in from Natalie, who would like to know, what are your tips for de-stressing before you take either of these exams? So Sam, let me go to you for that question first.
You bet. Well, in my theory, you're only as good as how you prepare. So if you prepare adequately, then hopefully you should go in knowing that you've done all you can. And if you haven't prepared, that's another story. And I think you may be a lot more stressed going into the exam. That's kind of the way I always looked at it. And I know it's different from every person, but really at the end of the day, the best thing I've found in taking an exam is to not think about it at all the day of. So whenever I took my FE exam, it was kind of daunting because you go into this test center and they body search you to make sure you don't have any like calculators in your pocket, and you have to basically go through these processes to make sure there's no cheating, right? And so I took mine at around 11, but my recommendation there is just to totally get it off your mind. Don't even look at your reference material the day of, because if you've adequately prepared, you're going to have it down. And you've been studying, you've been training for this for years in your schooling, and you'll be ready.
That's a great tip, Sam. I appreciate that. Raul, do you have anything else you'd like to add to de-stressing before the test, since you recently took that test, the PE exam in October?
Yeah, for sure. I think similar to what Sam said, hopefully before the exam, you've done all the studying you could, and, any additional studying wouldn't really help you. At least for me, that was my case. So again, I did like a month and a half of like just extreme studying between work and studying. And so like by the last like week or so, like I felt like I did like a really good job. I had to cover everything that I needed to cover. And you get to the point, at least for me, I got to the point where it's like I either know the material or I don't know the material, and there's just so many different possible questions that I was like, okay, I'm gonna take my chances, and hopefully they don't ask me about what I don't know. And so that's how I guess I felt going in. And again, the best way to, I guess, de-stress is to not think about it. And so like the 2 days prior to the exam, I know I spent it with friends. We were playing, like, I guess it was still during COVID, but we were playing outside in playing tennis outside. And so that was a good way for me to distract myself. And then, as long as you have a good plan going in, I think you'll be in good shape. And again, like Sam was saying, the more you're prepared, like the less likely the less likely you are to freak out. One thing I would recommend, in addition to preventing any possible like freakouts, is to like know the exam location. For the PE exam, especially if you're like in like more of like a rural area, you have to travel to a specific test center. So they have a test center in Austin. I think they have one in Fort Worth, or maybe one in Houston, for example, if we're talking Texas. But say if you lived like, in one of these suburbs, well, you have to travel to like the city and figure out. And then like for the PE exam, it's a full like 8-hour exam. And so, you got to prepare your morning breakfast, your lunch, maybe have a plan for afterwards for dinner. And so if you know what you're doing for those, that's great. And then specifically whenever you arrive, even if you're arriving to like the test, if you're having to travel for the exam, well, it's a good thing to know like where the entrances are for the exam, and even what to park. For me, like I live in Austin, I was taking the exam in Austin. I knew exactly where the building was because I've passed there all the time. But then even knowing all this, I was like pretty certain I was gonna be okay. But then I arrived the day of, and the parking garage where I thought I was gonna park was like blocked in. So I was like freaking out, thinking I was gonna be late. And so if you have a plan, you can avoid that and be all right. But again, just have a plan and try to do things with friends, or just not think about it, and you'll be all right.
It's a really great sentiment. I recently took a big exam, and I did drive by the exam facility the day before just to make sure I knew where I was going. I knew what the traffic would be like, and just kind of give you that period to relax. I want to move on and talk about a few other things. Kacey, unless you would like to share any quick de-stressing tips.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure how other people do this, but I enjoy music. And so it helps me kind of get in the zone as it were. So a lot of the times when I was in there, I would just hum a song, and I would psych myself up before and on my lunch break with music. And also know that you are going to run into questions on there that you likely will not be able to answer. If you need a win, move on to the next one and find a question that's easy and kind of get back in your flow, and just breathe.
Yeah, quick comment on that one, Lindsay. I would say like Kacey said, there's gonna be questions that you straight up just don't know. For me, in my case, there's like 2 or 3 questions that I for sure didn't know, but it was sort of what I thought were gimme questions where I just had to find it in my reference manual. And again, like I have everything tabbed up, I know where things are, and yet I could not find these sort of gimme questions where like I thought it was just gonna be like, hey, like the answer to this is right there, I just gotta find it. And like, I would search for over 5 minutes and I couldn't find it, and yet I kept on going. And then by the end after I did that for 2 or 3 questions, well, I was like pretty low on time. And so had I just accepted the fact that I didn't know it within like the first 2-3 minutes, or that I didn't know it and I couldn't find it, I could have just like guessed an answer and moved on. At least for the PE, I can't remember for the FE, but for the PE, you don't get penalized for guessing and getting it wrong. And so if you just straight up don't know or you can't find your answer, just pick one and move on, maybe come back to it later, but don't let it, I guess, bog you down like it did for me. So I know I did that for a couple of questions, and I went down to the wire on both the morning and the afternoon section.
I agree with you. And there's actually within the system you can flag questions. So what Raul just said is you can answer it, you can guess, and it won't hurt you. It won't be deducted against you. So you can answer it, but you can still flag it. So all of your questions at the end, you can see the ones that maybe you were unsure of. And even if there was a question where I was maybe 50% sure of it, I would flag them. Just because if I did have time at the end of the test, I'd go back and look over.
I don't know if this was the case for the PE, but when I took the FE, what I had been told was that all of the numerical options or the letter options were the same. So there'd be the same number of A, B, C, and D. So the ones that I wasn't sure of, I left blank and I went back through, obviously more helpful with paper, went back through. And if I had like a bunch of A, C, and D, then the ones that I didn't know, I picked B. So I don't know, that's helpful. And also I would encourage you to appreciate the humor of like what's going on around you, which is easier said than done. But I mean, for people who are not in our world, driving by and seeing a line of people with suitcases and red Rider wagons out the door with a whole bunch of books on a Saturday has to be hilarious.
It's a really great point, Kacey. I remember after the PE exam, I had my full-size suitcase of textbooks, and my husband picked me up along with another friend taking the exam on the same day. And we're like, please take us to get a drink immediately. So we came to a bar in Austin with our suitcases, and people were like, oh, where are you traveling from? We're like, oh no, these are books. And they were like, what? Come again? That's very funny. All right, so let me jump to the big picture before I get more to some questions in the chat. So obviously we're interested in becoming professional engineers. This is a goal of most civil engineering students. Kacey, why? Why are we becoming professional engineers? Is it going to give us more job opportunities in the future?
So yes, I was thinking about this in the lead up to this. So I think it's always, many of us are regularly looking to see what's out there. There's a lot more opportunity for a PE. You have a lot more flexibility on what you can work on where you can work. You also have a little more flexibility on the many facets in our practice that you're comfortable working in. And in terms of, what I typically look for on a team, I'm looking for a team to be led by a PE because I know that they've put in the work. I know that they are standing behind that seal because I know that seal means something to me, and I wouldn't risk it for anything really. So it means something coming from someone who is hiring engineers and from someone who has gotten a job both as an EIT and as a professional engineer. So I would encourage you all to take that step.
Thank you, Kacey. I appreciate that. All right. I missed a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm going to jump around just a tad. But I had a really good question come in from Caitlin. I'm not sure that we can answer it, but let's give it a try. She's wondering if attending graduate school would impact the timing of when you should take the FE exam.
Well, I can answer that one since I did go to grad school. It should not impact you. You can take for the FE exam. I don't remember what the minimum requirement is for you to take it, but as far as I know, you can. But once you do become eligible to take that one, you can pretty much take that whenever you want. So you can take that while you're still in your bachelor's degree, while you're in your master's degree, or even after you've graduated one or both of them and you're working full time. You can take that still after the fact. I have a friend that she didn't take her FE until maybe 2 or 3 years after graduating and working full time. I think that's similar to what Sam was doing right now. But yeah, I mean, my personal recommendation with the FE, which is the first one, I would just take that while you're still in school, because you're coming fresh out of those classes and you remember those more easily. I think Sam was saying he sort of took a course because he took it maybe 2 years afterwards, and he was having to try to go back and remembering what he did. And he spent, I forgot how long he said he spent on that one, but at least in my case, I took it my senior year of my bachelor's degree, and my studying was like 3 days before it, and that's it. So I don't particularly recommend that, but that was just my confidence level based on, I guess, what I was told about it before, my ability to remember it, and I guess how much, I was doing the questions and I felt comfortable with it at the time. If I was taking the test 2 or 3 years after taking those classes as well, yeah, I'd probably take a course too. But if you're still in grad school, having just taken your transportation class, well, odds are you're probably fine. You don't need that extra test prep for it.
This is so interesting because myself and a majority of the people I was in class with were all going to take the FE exam, and we were studying together, which was a huge benefit. But my senior year, they made it a requirement for graduating with our undergrad. And so I'm not familiar with a lot of folks waiting a year or two to take it. I thought that it was a huge benefit to take it while I was still in school because those classes were really fresh in my mind.
So I just want to clarify, I totally agree with that, Kacey. I actually took it 6 months after. I didn't wait 2 years, but I've waited that long for my PE, which I still haven't taken. And I totally recommend taking your FE as soon as possible. Even the 6 months, with adding in your work-life balance, you're just so much busier, and you'd be surprised how quickly you will forget some of the subjects. Because even in 6 months, I went back and I basically had to reteach myself certain subjects. Mm-hmm. So going back, am I sad that I waited that time? I don't think it was necessarily detrimental to me, obviously since I passed, but I probably would have taken it within a month or two after graduating. I just wanted a little bit of a break after school. And if you're like me, I would say maybe a month or two. That's a pretty good break, but 6 was starting to push it a little bit.
That's a really good point, Sam. I will admit, when I took the FE exam the first time, I did not pass. I took it my senior semester, my final senior semester in college, and I think I was too busy trying to pass my final exams to even bother just doing a little bit of studying for the exam. And so I was woefully underprepared. I just wasn't in the mindset of taking those practice tests and moving on as quickly as possible. So I ended up taking it twice. And the second time I studied, and that helped a lot. So definitely study, but like everyone is saying, when it's fresh in your mind, it's a great time to take it. And that brings me to another topic that I'd like to address with you all. The PE exam and the FE exam can be taken back to back. the state of Texas Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors has decoupled the experience requirements from the PE exam. So traditionally you had to have 3 or 4 years of experience depending on your level of degree, and then you could take the PE exam. Now you can take the PE exam and then in parallel earn your experience before you actually obtain that licensure. So would you recommend taking the PE exam fairly quickly into your career, or do you think it's beneficial to wait until you've practiced for a little while? And so Kacey, I think I'll ask you that question first since you have the most experience on our panel.
So I really struggle with this one because it's my understanding that the pass rate really hasn't changed much, but in my mind, I believe that the PE exam is meant to test what you've learned in practice, not necessarily what you've learned in school. So there's a part of me that questions why somebody fresh out of school would take the PE exam. But like we all said, it's really helpful to have it fresh on your mind after school. And so when I was studying for the PE exam, I did have to reteach myself a lot of things that I had forgotten, things that I wasn't really using every day. So I don't know.
Might be a personal preference.
I can argue both ways. So, I mean, but like if like life gets in the way, I couldn't imagine those people who study for the PE exam who have children at home are saints and rock stars in my mind. So I'm glad that I was able to finish that exam before I had kids.
Thank you, Kacey. And Raul, you took the PE exam recently before you had 4 years of experience or 3 years working as an engineer after graduate school. What do you think about that timeline?
I think I would recommend taking it as soon as possible. Well, one, because like you're fresh out of college, you still have like probably the ability to remember and pick. Well, maybe you can't like remember exactly what you did for that hydraulics class or that transportation class. Once you start going into like the notes and doing some problems, you'll remember that, and you're just more familiar with it than if you were 4 years down the line. Not that you say you can't do it, but you're just more familiar with it. And then and so like for that reason, I would say go ahead and take it. But at the same time, like Kacey was saying, the exam is meant to like test your competency after you've gotten some experience. And so for my exam, for example, there's like a masonry section, a like wood section, or there's like masonry, steel, concrete design, like all different types of design that I needed to know. Where like if I was just taking it fresh out of school, well, like I probably would not have remembered it. Or if I was taking it just right out of school, I don't have experience to be able to solve those problems. I guess luckily for me, I didn't take that exam until maybe a year after working, just because of timing. But luckily I was able to have that wood experience, that masonry design experience, to be able to answer those questions more comfortably than if I had to learn it fresh on my own. Because at least for me in school, like we didn't have at the time any masonry classes or any wood design. And so luckily I got that experience through work rather than through having to teach myself on my own.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I recall I took the civil exam in the water resources category in the afternoon for my PE. And there were definitely some topics that I did not learn in school and I learned on the job in the afternoon session of the PE exam. So it was helpful for me personally to have some working experience, although I was forced because I was before they did the decoupling. So I didn't have a choice there. Okay, well, let me make a quick announcement before I ask you all some more questions, because I think the audience has gotten a little bit shy, or perhaps we've answered most of their questions, but we have a raffle prize that we're giving away during this session. So drawn at random based on everybody who's currently in attendance, our raffle prize winner is Mr. David Matoka, who's actually an Austin branch member and will be our speaker for the next session. So David, if you're on, we are going to send you a prize by email after the symposium. Congratulations. Everybody, round of applause for David. Woo.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, you didn't know you were going to get a prize, huh? Your prize was just coming to present to us at 3 o'clock for a virtual tour.
There you go.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, David. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get back to a really in the weeds question about the actual PE and FE exams. And so a question again from one of our attendees, Natalie, is it better to answer the easy or quick questions first and then go back to the hard ones? I see Kacey's nodding her head yes. What do you think about that, Sam? You're disagreeing.
Well, I disagree, but I think this is a personal preference. Whatever your test taking routine is, stick to it. My theory on that is the amount of time you spend reading the question and thinking about it your first go around, the amount of time you waste there is completely wasted if you don't answer. So you should at least attempt, in my opinion, but you should flag it.
Flag them to go back and look at them later?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a great tip. Raul, what do you think about that question?
I'd sort of agree with Sam. Like, I guess ultimately it's a personal preference. So you can do whatever you want, but my personal preference is like, I like to go from start to finish. And if I can answer the question, then I'll answer it. If I can't, I'll like try it, and then if I can't do it, then I'll move on. Sometimes it doesn't work out as I hoped. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe I stuck on the problem too much. But like Sam was saying, like a lot of time is wasted if you're reading a question and you don't answer it. And if you skip it and move on, come back, well, you have to read it again and relearn the question again. And like, I don't know about you guys personally, but at least for myself, I consider myself a slow reader. So, you know, whenever I'm reading a full paragraph, well, like sometimes that can take a while. You know, maybe the first time you'll read it once and it's like, okay, like now you've generally, for the PE exam, for example, like you're reading the problem, you've identified it as a masonry problem, for example. And that, so in like your back of your mind, you're like, okay, well, I got to use that masonry reference material. And so like, while I'm reading that question, that's what I'm thinking. And then once I find that material and I'm looking at the specific section I might use, well, then at this point, at least for me, maybe, for example, I might have forgotten what the original question was. So I have to like read it again. And, you know, at the same time, you're looking for any keywords that might change the way that you answer the question. They might have like the random knot in there that you might have missed. And so again, me self-identifying as like a slow reader, I like to just go straight from start to finish and do it that way. But ultimately, it's a personal preference. If you know you're not gonna be able to answer it, yeah, just identify it, move on, come back to it if you can.
I agree with that. Don't skip through and find the easy questions, but as you're going through, if there's a harder one that's going to take a little time, flag it and come back to it.
And on that note, if you are taking a hard copy paper exam where you actually have to fill in the bubbles, don't miss a bubble and throw off your entire flow because you left one blank and then you put the wrong answer in the wrong line, if you know what I'm saying, on those Scantron test sheets. That can be a critical mistake and it will cost you a lot of time to fix that. All right, well, with that, we are nearly close to the end of our panel. So at this time, I want to do a little bit of wrap up. So I want to go around and ask all of our panelists if there's anything that you want our attendees to take as a keynote from this session. What information would you like to leave them with? So Kacey, I'd like to start with you if you have sound.
I do. So, oh goodness, I was hoping I wouldn't go first, but I guess one of the things I was thinking about as we went through this is I know a number of really great engineers who have not passed the PE exam. Just keep trying. There's a number of, I would imagine everybody in this room has second guessed themselves in their career path and what they're doing. Lean on the folks around you. Definitely find some support, find some study buddies, and just keep plowing ahead. You got this.
Thank you, Kacey. That's very inspirational. All right, Sam, would you like to go next? What are your key takeaways for the audience today?
Yeah, you bet. One thing I think we haven't really discussed, but the takeaway I would like to mention is I feel like there's a lot of pressure on getting these exams completed and completed swiftly. So I think that's kind of correct, but also incorrect. There's really no rush. If you're not ready, don't push it upon yourself. For instance, if you're not sure what you want to specialize in, you're not sure what you want to do in your career, there's no reason to rush in your PE exam. Figure out what you love, figure out what type of exam you would like to take, because you should take the exam that you're going to practice in. And once you've decided that, then take your time to adequately prepare. It's not a race. There's no finish line in this. It's your own journey.
Thank you, Sam. That's a really good point. You have a lot of time in your life to be a professional engineer and to be the engineer of record for very important projects. So there's no rush. And even when you do obtain your PE license, you still may be working under another engineer of record and not immediately signing and sealing things. So absolutely. All right, last but not least, Raul, what would you like our audience to take away today?
Yeah, I think ultimately, you can take the exam whenever you want. Basically, once you're ready for it, you can take it like immediately after school, wait down the line, 5, 10 years, whatever you want. But I think ultimately, once you decide to take it, I think preparation is key. Whether you're someone that needs like 3-4 months to study and you want to just study 1 hour each day, you can do it that way. Or if you're a last minute study, you're going to study 2 weeks, and that's going to be the only thing you do. Like, you can do it that way too. But I think once you decide to like sign up and take the exam, I think looking at what the different course requirements are, all the different materials that you have to study and learn and get, making a plan, whether that plan is to study 1 hour each day for the next 2 months, or like, hey, I'm gonna start doing the structural section first, then I'm gonna move on to hydraulics and transportation. Just really, before you even do any actual study, figure out how you're gonna do it and what that really means. Because ultimately, if you're just kind of doing it like sort of little bits by bits, and you're studying, but you don't really know, if you don't have a plan as to like how you're going to do it or how you're going to be able to cover all the material, well, you could be stuck with like a limited amount of time at the end, and you don't want to do that. And so ultimately, just having a plan and being able to stick to it is what you should do, or what I would recommend at least.
Thank you. That's some really good insights. And if I can add a personal tidbit that kind of builds upon what Raul said, being prepared, to me, those tests are all about your time management. And so take your practice test, wear a watch, and understand how quickly do you need to move through those problems. And again, be organized, tab your book. I don't know if you guys could see this. This is my PE exam reference book. Tabs, I love them. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. This has been a wonderful panel. We really enjoy your questions. If you have any further questions, you're welcome to reach out to the ASCE Texas section office. I'll put our email address here in the chat. Actually, I'm going to give you my email address. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to coordinate with our panelists and follow up with answers. I can also connect you with folks from the Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors that can help you with the application process and understanding the timeline for getting ready for those exams. So with that, thank you for joining us today, and this will conclude our session.
Recording is stopped.
Thank you, Sean.